And so this is the map that I made to explain this concept to everyone who told me I was crazy. And then I think it just confirmed it once they saw the map. But it's really fascinating because this was the journey that I started on April 29th, 2016, the 11th anniversary of my father's passing. But what's really fascinating is this isn't the only journey I've been on for the past 2.5 years. Not only was 19 the year I lost my dad, but 19 was also the first time in my life that I ever met an openly gay adult. Having grown up in Nebraska, the son of a well-known minister, my exposure to the LGBT community was what I read in the newspaper and saw on TV, which taught me 3 very important lessons about LGBT people. Number 1, all gay men grow up and become drag queens. Number 2, the LGBT community spends the entire year plotting how to wear as little clothes as possible on a float downtown. And the 3rd lesson I got, perhaps the one I got loudest and clearest of all, was that anyone who was LGBT was going to hell. And there was nothing they could do to stop that. Now imagine my surprise when I leave Nebraska for Memphis for college and I show up to my first class. It's about 100 degrees on this August day in Tennessee. And I walk in and I meet my male professor and his male partner. And I'm looking at them and knowing the temperature outside, and they're wearing long pants and a button-down shirt and sweater vests, and I'm thinking, this is really great Speedo weather and you guys are totally missing out. And then they were both so traditionally masculine, I thought, gosh, I feel bad for you guys. You're gonna make no money this weekend because you're the worst drag queens I've ever heard of. And then after class, I saw them get into a Lexus convertible and drive off, and I thought, whew, I don't know any deviants that can afford a Lexus convertible. And so from that first encounter, that first interaction, that first meeting with someone who said, this is who I am, this is who God made me to be, and so I'm going to live my life as I was created, I started to have my stereotypes changed. And in the process, I became the most annoying student at my campus ministry. Because it seemed like every week I would come to my pastor and I'd say, Pastor, I've always heard this, but I was talking with so-and-so who's a lesbian, and she was telling me this, and that doesn't make sense with what I've been told, and I was talking with so-and-so, and they said this, and I've never heard that the Bible was described that way. What do you mean you can interpret more than one way? And I would ask question after question after question, until one day I was reading the Bible and I had a revelation. I was looking around at my classmates, whom were over 50% African American at the University of Memphis. And I realized, I've never heard anyone tell them that they're going to hell for being black. Around the same time, I had a relative who was diagnosed as bipolar, what during biblical times we might say meant she had a demon in her. And I thought, well, nobody's saying she's going to hell for being bipolar. And I thought back to my sister who's left-handed, and as much as we like to make fun of her for it, I never heard anyone say she was going to hell for being left-handed. And as I was thinking about that and reading the Bible, I had a revelation that what those 3 things had in common was that none of those people chose those characteristics of themselves. And finally, after 20-some years of praying to God to keep me from being anything but this, I realized that I was gay and that there was nothing I could do to change it, and that I had never chosen this. Now, the fascinating thing about Memphis, Tennessee is it's very squarely in the Bible Belt, and so everybody is a Christian. Either you're a believer and you go to church, or you're what I like to call a secular Christian, where you say you are, because if you don't, you won't have any friends, you'll be ostracized. And so as I started to come out, I looked around at my peers on how to do this, and it was really difficult because some of them I talked to, they were all in either one camp. In one camp, they said, well, the church said I can't be gay and Christian, so I've just gone ahead and done the opposite of everything they've ever told me. And then I talked to some other people, and they said, well, I spent 20-some years, I figured out this part about myself, but I don't want to leave my church and my faith. And they said I can't be both, so I'm going to stay in the closet and marry somebody the opposite gender. And here I was, stuck in the middle, having literally grown up in a whole bunch of churches, and knowing that I had a place there, but also having spent 20-some years figuring out this other part of myself and not really wanting to abandon that. So looking around me and seeing no one else like me, I added a secret mission to my annual road trips. And that secret mission was that I was going to find another gay Christian. Now, I need to preface this next part by saying that there is absolutely nothing wrong with being in your 50s, 60s, or 70s. We clap for that. Yeah, I like that. However, as I finally started meeting some LGBT Christians around the country, they were all in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. And for a 25-year-old who just desperately wanted to know that I fit in somewhere, I didn't see anyone like me. There's an amazing quote that I heard Marian Wright Edelman preach at the 2015 ELCA Youth Gathering, and she was talking about African-American male teachers, and she said, it's really hard to be what you can't see. And when I heard her say that, I realized that was exactly what I was going through at that time. And so, having turned 26, having not found these young adult LGBT Christians, I moved to Washington, D.C., and I did what any entrepreneurial Midwesterner would do. I said, well, if I can't find these young adult LGBT Christians, I'll just bring them to me. And so I started a group called Queer for Christ, with the explicit outreach of being to young adult LGBTQIA through Z followers of Christ. And I know that the word queer is a pejorative to some of my elders, but to me it was the only word that I could choose that encompassed that alphabet soup without putting the alphabet soup on there. And I chose for Christ because I knew a number of people who believed in Jesus and followed Jesus, but the word Christian was scary. And it connotated a lot of pain and negativity. So I thought, you don't have to be a Christian, you can just be pro-Jesus. And the reason it was so important to me that the name told you exactly what the group was because I had gone 20-some years with the existence of Reconciling Works, Affirmation, More Light, Presbyterians, Reconciling Ministries Network. Do any of you know what those mean if you aren't part of them? And what's so cool about this group was that because it was in Washington, D.C., where I had moved to start the job at the cathedral, there were people from South Dakota and South Carolina and every state who came to work for their representatives. But there were also people from Suriname and Hungary and China and South Africa because they came to work for their embassies or international nonprofits. And there were Lutherans like me, there were Methodists, there were Episcopalians, there were African Methodist Episcopalians, there were Presbyterians, there were Baptists, there were Quakers, there were Catholics, there were Mormons, you name it, we had at least one. And what's so fascinating about this group is that no matter where people came from, no matter what denomination they grew up in, they came to the group and they all shared the same story. And it's the one that I shared with you tonight. I grew up feeling unwanted by my church, unwanted by my faith, and unwanted by my God. Now, when you start a group called Queer for Christ and you write a bunch of stuff on the internet about it, kids, stuff you put on the internet doesn't go away. Just take that one home with you tonight if you miss everything else. Because when I started this, national park experts told me I'd been saving up throughout my 20s, knowing this was the goal for 30. And I reached out to some experts, and they said, oh, yeah, you've probably saved up a fifth of what it'll take. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to do like all those YouTube celebrities I see. I'll just fundraise from the road. I'll crowdfund, and people will donate, and it'll be great, and put up YouTube videos, and it'll work out perfect. Pollyanna here. That was not the case. And very quickly, I realized that in 2016, looking at our polarized world, I figured it's probably because they Googled me and they knew I was a gay Christian. And that was just too out there, too controversial, this was when I was looking for company sponsors. I thought there's no way a company is gonna work with me if they Google me. And then I thought, well, if individuals know this, then America was not very friendly to LGBT people. There's no way I'll pull off this project. So I basically decided I was going to go back in the closet for this journey, for this 3-year project, and do whatever I could to hide that Google and lower my voice for interviews and not let anyone know this part of me. Except 9 months into my journey, in January of 2017, the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation, I got a lightning bolt, except it came in the form of an Instagram message. Instagram is a social media platform where people post pictures. It's a lot of teenagers. And I got this message, and it started out and it said, hello, I'm a 15-year-old and I go to a private Baptist school in Texas, and I'm not out of the closet to anyone. But I was reading about you and your group for LGBT young adult Christians, and I just wanted to thank you. Because now I know that when I grow up, I can be ordinary. And he goes on to say, and then I found your Instagram, and I see you're setting world records. And now I know when I grow up, I can be extraordinary. And it was a lightning bolt right to my heart and my tear ducts that told me, Mikah, God is giving you over 1 piece of earned media per day on this world record trip. Do you think you could use that to be for that kid, for 10-year-old Mikah, and the people you've met from all around the world who never saw anyone like them, and then therefore had a hard time being themselves? And so from that point on, I committed that any chance I had, any interview I could do, I would not only tell them that I was a gay man that loved the outdoors, because apparently that's a thing we're still working on. But I would mention that not only was my dad a pastor, but that I was a practicing Christian still. So that people like that kid could know that not only can they be ordinary, but they can also be extraordinary. And one of the coolest things that came about after that was that this Easter of 2018, I got the chance to sit down in Dallas, Texas, in the church with the largest primarily LGBT congregation in the world. And I sat down with the daughter of the president who, while I was in high school, ran during an election in which 70% of my state voted to make marriage one man, one woman. And this daughter, Jenna Bush, just happened to be a really big Parks fan, which is why she did the interview. But as you'll see in this clip I'm about to show you, I'm proud to say that I got Jenna a little verklempt over hearing that there are Americans who feel unwelcome in churches because of what our culture has said. And ever since that's aired, I get between 1 and 5 messages a day on social media from people around the world who say, I saw this story, and for the first time in my life, I know that I have a future. So I want to share that clip with you if you haven't seen it. And this is me and Jenna Bush hanging out on the Today Show.
And you see
a lot of
and that voice, I was not expecting him to have a set of pipes like that.
Yeah, I can sing too.
Okay, so when the president's daughter says you can sing, you gotta make good. My next song for you, you heard a little bit of in that clip, and a brief setup on the song. It's from a movie musical by the name of Camp. Have any of you seen it? Show of hands. I got one. You can proudly. It's PG. You're okay. It's a song from that. I think it's on Netflix still. So if you want to watch it later tonight, you are totally allowed to go home. And when you hear this song, you have to turn to the person next to you though and say, "They're not as good as Mikah." But the song is called "Here's Where I Stand," and it's sung by a character who really wanted to go to musical theater camp for the summer. That's kind of the setting of the movie. And her parents didn't want her to go. They wanted her to go to fat camp. And so the compromise they came up with was that she could go to musical theater camp, but they were going to wire her jaw shut for the summer so she could only have liquid food and would lose some weight. And at this point in the movie, her parents show up to the final camp talent show, and she walks on stage, spotlight. Cue spotlight? No. And sings this song with her mouth not having any wires on it. And so as you listen to it tonight, as you contemplate the lyrics, I invite you to remember not only who you are, but more importantly, whose you are.
I'm counting